What I have to say about the next topic is that it's very close to my heart because, well, I can relate to it. Many of us come to our language industry from different backgrounds without having any proper education, and we bring some interesting aspects to this profession, but at the same time we don't have this coherent knowledge system. And at the same time, we have institutions that do prepare proper language specialists. We just want to make sure that those specialists know how to deal with the real world out there with the tasks and with the industry. So with that, I'm handing over the mic to you, Vava.
Thanks, Igor. Yeah, you just ate all my bread. My whole intro speech went to ashes. But anyway, yeah, I must say that I must be the worst person to moderate this call because neither as a translator nor as a localization engineer, I have no education at all. But maybe, well, I can ask some questions from the outside. So our today's panelists are Diego Creseri. You already know him today, and not only today. We see him a lot. And Diego Creseri is CEO and founder at Creative Words, right? And someone who has his opinion about translation education. Then we have Max Troyer, who is a professor at the Middlebury Institute of International Studies at Monterey, right? And we have Cleaser Brown, who is now a freelance project manager and localization engineer, as I understand, and also a graduate of the University of Maryland in translation and localization project management. So with that said, Diego, I wanted to start with you because if we're talking about the talent gap, perhaps it makes sense to start with what kind of gap that buyer side sees. So maybe you can describe this.
Yeah, sure. Let me start with something positive, actually, and I will talk about my experience. So we are a single language vendor, basically focusing into on Italian as a source of target language. So I will refer to the Italian market and Italian education system. What I see as a positive factor is the students, when they graduate, they have a very good source language skills. So that's the positive one. But there are a few things that are actually missing, I would say. And starting with astonishingly target language skills, which is quite strange. And of course, all the matters related to technology, even CAT tools, that they're not very prepared on those. They're not prepared on actual services that the market is needing. And I'm talking about localization. I'm talking about post-editing. I'm talking about, they don't know what the translation management system is, for instance. This is not taught at the university. And let's not talk about continuous localization or other specific needs of the market. And however, there's something that is even more weird, in my opinion. It's a huge lack of preparation on business stuff. I mean, they don't do any business training, like sales, marketing, financials, any fiscal stuff that is really important for them to get into the market. And these are the questions that I've been asked mostly by my candidate freelancers, like how can I start working? How can I send you an invoice? And they don't know anything about this stuff. Another great lack is the networking. They don't have any possibility of networking. So basically they're not really prepared to do it. They don't have any contacts. And this is really something that needs to be improved, I guess, because when you get out of the school, you need to have contacts already, or to be able to make them at least. I'm generalizing that there are schools that are really good at it, at networking, all this business stuff, but this is the general situation.
Okay, thanks, Diego. I now want to go to Max. Max, as someone who teaches localization and translation, of course, you are from the other side of the pond, so probably the situation is different also because of this, but what do you see some similarities on the US side, and what do you think about this at all?
Yeah, thanks, Vova. Yeah, so as Vova mentioned, I teach localization in Monterey, California. My program, Translation and Localization Management, the TLM program, we train localizers. My school teaches translation and interpretation. I'm more on the localization side, training project managers, localization engineers, desktop publishing specialists, software internationalization to some degree if someone comes into the program with a CS degree. And then also, you know, subtitling and dubbing. We have kind of a wide curriculum that covers a lot of aspects of the industry. And I think with what Diego says really resonates in the sense that our program is not super affordable, to be quite frank about it. It's an investment that our students make. And I think Class 3 will echo that the Maryland program is not cheap, it's an investment. And we can't train the world. We send about 80 students out into the industry every spring, and they get snatched up very quickly. But there is some aspect that we can't train everyone, and so I also don't think that it's really, you can debate whether everyone needs a degree to be successful in the industry. There's a part of me that thinks that we get the best teams where we combine people who don't know anything about a given topic. They're completely naive and look at it from a totally new light. And then we have people who have gone through a program such as mine and have all the best practices in mind, and maybe someone eventually says, you know, why don't we try this new way that we've never thought about? And so when it comes to Talent Gap, I think it's up to the entire industry to kind of make the industry more exciting. Things like Loc at Home is doing that. I hope there are new people that have joined this webinar and kind of are testing the waters to see if this is something they want to go into. And ultimately, we've got to attract people to the industry. If we're talking about a talent gap, we have to decide, is it because we're not training enough people or because we can't attract people to the industry in the first place? So in a survey of about 40 or 50 North American technology companies in a meeting a couple years ago, I asked, of your engineers that you have at your company, your software internationalization engineers, like how many feel that they've come to software internationalization engineering and their career has now kind of died on the vine, that you've left the feature development behind and now you're doing internationalization and you like it, but you realize you're not going to go much further in your career? And basically it was divided 50-50. There were about half of those leaders of those tech companies said, yeah, I really have to pay those internationalization engineers more because they know they're giving up a lot. And others said, no, we know that localization revenue drives this company. And so we put all our weight behind those internationalization engineers. And so I think you can take that survey that it was an informal survey, but I think ultimately, if we're paying people what they deserve to do this and that they're creating the revenue, that people will naturally come into the industry. So I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, thanks, Max. And let me tell you that you won the Best Picture Quality Award for today, and it's outrageous. And I envy you. I don't know how. But anyway, Clisri, what's your take on this as someone who has recently graduated from such a school?
So I would like to say that I can understand that a lot of these things would definitely be very concerning, and I can't necessarily speak for every translation and localization program out there, but I know that personally at the University of Maryland in GSIT, which stands for Graduate Studies of Interpreting and Translation, where I got my degree in translation and localization project management, we did talk a lot about CAT tools and translation management systems. So I really think that this program had emphasized something very important, which was the whole technology aspect. Because I mean, a modern day translator saying that they want to translate but not know anything about CAT tools is like a person saying they want to be a journalist but don't know how to use a word processor. It's realistically not happening.
Yeah, that's interesting, because even in our own chat here, we had a discussion during the day where people complained about CAT tools. These discussions like come and go. They are like a constant in our industry, but still. And it's interesting that you are now saying about the US education, and we see that here, at least from what Diego says, and I also see some comments in the chat, that say that there is nothing like this in the schools here. So I wanted to talk a bit about those differences in approaches to translation education here in Europe and in the US. So Diego, I don't know if you're well aware of how the education organization is organized, sorry for the tautology, but maybe you can comment on that. You're muted.
I did it. Yeah, I don't want to generalize, but I can talk of some universities without mentioning names. And what I feel is that they are like focusing more on the language part of the studies than on the technology. So there are a lot of studies on literature. There are more language schools. Like when I started university at like 21 years ago, and my course was more practical. It was, you would do interpreting, you would do simultaneous interpreting, you do translation, no CAT tools, absolutely, but at least you would translate a lot. And you would learn the techniques. And now it's more about the language itself, and that's it. It's more theoretical. But again, it's not like that in all universities. There are many universities that are starting doing CAT tools more and more. And for instance, with CAT tools, the excuse that they use is always they are expensive. And SmartCat, of course, is a good example of free CAT tool that could be used at university, but it's not. So we need to work on that. And so yes, they're not practical anymore. They're not something that is preparing you to do a job, to have a profession. It's more the cultural side. And I think this is because of the probably aging of the teachers themselves, or the fact that they're not really into the industry. They're not actual professionals. They're more on the research side.
Can we say that there may be a gap where the localizer guys are more from the younger generation and the translation guys are more from the older generation? There is also some maybe generation gap between them.
Oh, but they're not even translators. They probably studied language, and all they did, and not I don't want to say it's not useful, but all they did is teaching. They have never worked hands-on on the profession.
I believe you also had some anecdote, some story about your coming to teach about CAT tools to some university.
Oh yeah.
Share that you want to skip it?
I'm pretty sure that person will not be here because he's not interested. But yeah, I went to a class. I asked the professor to give me one of his hours to teach SmartCat. And what he did is he left the room. So he was not showing any kind of interest in the topic. And his course was the technology course. So it was his stuff, but he left the room. So, and this shows how involved he was in the topic. So
yeah,
that's how it is. It's like, to summarize, more language than technology. Sorry.
Yeah. Max Glittery, it's obviously a bit different on your side, but I wanted to ask if translation education and localization education go like hand in hand, or are they more of different parts of different curricula or whatever? How is it? And another question inside the question, how many of schools like yours are there in the US at all?
Well,
Okay.
Go ahead.
I'll answer your first question, and I think that was about do translation and localization go hand in hand? So I would say that definitely translation and localization, they can go hand in hand, but they shouldn't be confused for one another. Because for me, like, translation is about making sure that the message is clear going from language A to language B, and localization is making sure that the product as a whole works for your new target audience. And a lot of the times that does have to do with translation, but you can't just stop at translation. You have to make sure that even the color schemes and the fields for entering data are appropriate and accurate for your target audience. It's just like so much. But yes, they do overlap at a lot of different points.
I would like to maybe look at whether or not they need to overlap. I agree they do overlap, but do they need to overlap in the sense that if you're really good at language, does that mean that you're going to be a good project manager or that you're going to be a good business person? I don't necessarily think so. And back in 2017, in the TLM program here in Monterey, we decided to divide into two what we were calling specializations. So if you had the language skills to become a translator, you would take translation courses. But if you had a second language that you weren't ready to be a translator, you would take these language studies courses to get your non-native language better. And that was us acknowledging that not everyone has to be a translator. In fact, we're not going to get people into our program that have computer science degrees or business degrees who want to become localization project managers if we're requiring them to have translator quality language skills. So at some point in my program, we're acknowledging that we're kind of wrestling right now at this moment. Do you even need a second language to be a good translation project manager or localization project manager or localization engineer, or in the C-suite making business decisions? Once you've acknowledged that growth is global and that you need to have your company be globally ready, then you're acknowledging that translation and localization is important. And isn't that the important thing, that we're getting the work that these businesses are sending our way? So yes, we're definitely exploring the overlap between language and technology and business, and trying to decide if someone who is passionate about language but doesn't want to be a translator has a place in localization. And we've decided most definitely. But historically, if you look at who is running who is running most translation companies, there are people that have a background in translation who are now managing and owning these companies. But as time goes on, I think that we'll see kind of a shift that people who are translators and are good at translating will simply charge more and become more senior translators. And then the business people are starting to kind of take over the business space.
Can you imagine a person that doesn't have interest in languages have interest in language project management? Like, what kind of thinking would bring them there?
I think a simple act of going to another country and not speaking that language puts you in the shoes of someone just not, or if you took some high school Spanish and tried to go to Spain or Mexico and you're trying out this language, you really feel what it's like to not be understood and not get your message across. And then when you go work in an industry, you're like, wow, now I know what our international customers feel like when they call up and try to speak Spanish to our customer support and they can't, we only support English or whatever language. So I think it's, for some reason, it's just, or to some degree, it's just experiencing, not understanding that lights a fire under people's feet. We've got to get everything in every language, basically.
I think also an important point you raised was if we even want the person who wants to be a translator to learn project management. I think there in our industry there is a lot of misunderstanding between the different roles. So there's a lot of time where translators will say that project managers do something wrong and project managers will complain translators. So if a person just learns just one line, and doesn't see the big picture and his role in this big picture, they can get some wrong views about how all the things work together. So what are your thoughts on this? Maybe Diego, Clisri?
Well, there's one of the things, the gaps that is that there's no education about roles in the industry. Of course, you're right. They don't know what a project manager is. And I was overlooking a comment from Renato, and if you allow me, I want to briefly comment on that. It's true, there's education, there's training, but I'm not sure that the only teaching the concept of CAD tools, for instance, would be enough. I think you need some practice as well, even during university. But I also believe that the industry needs to do something to keep teaching the people. You cannot learn everything at university, of course. So
yeah,
this is what we do. We spend a lot of time teaching people, like doing free courses, free meetups, free open days, however you want to call it. It's like probably 10% of our time and money that goes in there. Because, of course, university is not enough and training is something else.
Yeah. That was actually, sorry, Clisri, that was actually a provocative question I was going to ask. Like, maybe it's your business to educate people. Maybe it's not
Wayne. Otherwise, Renato wouldn't like the word.
Sorry, Clisri, you were saying something.
Oh, I would like to add something. So at University of Maryland, we had a course called Localization Business Fundamentals, where we were going through what goes on really in the translation and localization industry. And we sort of worked it out in a way that was a lot like playing a game. So we were seeing what it was like on client side, buyer side. It was just like, very eye-opening because of course, like just being good at the language, you're not necessarily going to be a good business person. So that's why you need to have somebody break down the business fundamentals to you. So it was a very good course.
How exactly is it, I wonder, Diego, that you mentioned that you train your translators, but maybe you could go a little bit in depth about it. What kind of specific events you have? What kind of specific courses you give?
Oh, well, we do a lot of stuff. We had, of course, internships. The company is not big. We are, I think, 14 or 15. And only this year, even with COVID, we had 15 interns at our company, which is a huge number. And then we have a free platform for the Italian market where we teach all these fundamentals like fiscal things and different services that you can offer, cut tools. It's very basic, but it's what they need to start with. And then we have open days where we show what we do in a company. We show the roles that we have, the organizational structure and how they are intertwined and so on. And then we have newsletters, we have video interviews, we do a lot of stuff. We really spend a lot of time on that. And the main reason was not because I am very generous, it's because I was kind of tired of having to answer these very same questions every time from the people. So we thought, why don't we record some short videos and put them there for free so we can raise the bar, or the starting point, let's say, of the people contacting us, applying to work with us. So that's our main, sorry?
How does that work out financially? I mean, to start a language company, you do not need to do all this stuff. Yeah, there are lots of other language companies who do not do this stuff and they probably charge the same money. So by doing all of this for free, you're spending your money and you're probably educating people who will not necessarily stay just with you. So
of course, no, they're not. They're mostly freelancers working for me and my competitors, probably. But I think it's something that you do for giving something back to the industry. And we probably save money on vendor management. And yeah, because we spent a lot of time on that. So yeah, there's no direct financial return at all. It's a big expense, but it's an investment for the industry, I would say.
I also had a provocative question to Max and maybe to Clisri as well. So nothing that is available in localization engineering or project management is actually like rocket science. So why can't people just learn it all by themselves without resorting to an institution or a course or whatever? So maybe Max can start and Clisri can add something.
This is something that I think about from time to time, especially, well, I'll start with internationalization engineering. If you've got a software engineer, the software engineering is probably 90% of the skills they need to be an internationalization engineer, and it's easier to add the 10% of internationalization engineering that they need. Maybe similar to a localization project manager. You take someone who's really good at project management. They're a people person already. They love working with people, building teams, onboarding vendors or talent, as we refer to these people now. Maybe it's easier to start with someone who's a seasoned project manager and add localization. Maybe it's easier to take someone who's an expert at language, maybe a copywriter, as mentioned in a previous panel. Maybe it's easier to take a copywriter who speaks 2 languages and say, you could just shift a little bit and be a translator. And instead of, starting with these pure language people and trying to take them to these kind of lofty locations. So that's something I do think about. And it's an interesting idea. I think in many cases, personally, I have a degree in computer science. I have a degree in French with my undergrad, but at no point did I consider going into the localization industry, and no one recommended that I go into the localization industry. I think Kayseri is in a similar boat. Like we both love language, and no one told us, by the way, localization exists, you should look into it. So we got into the industry kind of by accident. And how many people is that happening to? Like, don't we need to do more outreach to schools, especially universities, and tell all these language nerds, by the way, localization is out there, go into it.
Kayseri, what do you think?
So I would definitely say that it would be very helpful for the localization industry to go out to universities and let people know that this exists, because as Max said, this could be very helpful, because I remember going in as a Spanish major at Howard University, and people would ask me all the time, like, so what are you going to do with that? Or they would think that all I could be with a Spanish degree would possibly be like maybe a Spanish teacher, maybe a translator, but there's just so much more that you can possibly do with like a language degree if you go and specialize. Let's say with a master's degree, like I did with University of Maryland, where I learned about not only translation as an art, but also localization, project management, and like CAD tools and TMSs, and about how this industry works. So I'm just like amazed that all of this was out here, and I just happened to stumble on it by mistake.
But do you think it was like useful for you in the end? What was the most important thing that you took from there that you couldn't have taken like by self-education?
I think some of the most important things that I wouldn't have gotten from self-education were the feedback from the instructors, absolutely, and the opportunities to network, because we had some professors that really made sure that we were getting ourselves out there. They told us like we had to have a LinkedIn, that we had to, like, you know, pre-COVID, go to in-person networking events and like bring back some business cards and mention some things about the person that you met, just to prove that, you know, you really were there and paying attention and listening. And I think that those things you can't really get on your own. And then again, it's just like this whole industry is about communication. So at the end of the day, communication takes other people. So you need other people to thrive.
I also kind of want to comment on why an education is important. So in my program, we have 3 or 4 courses on localization project management. We have a course dedicated to account management at LSPs. We have a course for vendor management at LSPs, a course on sales, how to sell localization. We have a course to become a solutions architect. Basically, we have courses on audiovisual localization if you want to go into the subtitling industry or dubbing industry, desktop publishing courses, website localization, continuous localization. Igor, I cover Surge in my software class, and students are definitely learning the latest in continuous localization. So I don't think there's any way to self-curate the experience that we're giving here at MIS. And it's basically the person who is teaching the sales course, sales localization. So, you get access to these faculty who do these things. And that's the magic touch that we offer, I think.
What do you think, Diego, for you, someone with such a degree that Max has now so loaded, would it be like a benefit or an advantage for you to take someone?
Well, of course. My last hire, my future hire, she'll start in October. She comes from Dublin, DCU, and you can really see the difference because she has some practical courses on project management and very practical stuff. I saw the slides of the course, and they are great. I mean, and this is something that you need to learn somewhere. And also, you cannot like get self-training, because I like the word curated. It's not easy to find something useful, something valuable in all this content that is out there. It's trainings everywhere, a lot of money to be spent. It's really difficult. And then it's not just the topic, it's a path. It's more than like a path that you do. It's not just something individual topic that you need to learn. So yeah, it's a great. If I could go back, I would probably try and study in Monterey. Yeah.
Oh, if we all could. Before we go to the Q&As, because there are a lot of questions and I see some good ones, I want to also discuss a question that Clisri raised while we were rehearsing this panel. So Clisri, do you want maybe to talk about this now? Do you want me to talk about it?
You can open up the question.
Yeah, so the question is the diversity in our industry in general, in Work from Home in particular, because as some of you may have noticed, Clisri is the only Black person that is presenting today on a panel today. And frankly, we did not have any requests. So how does it come like this, that our industry is so white? I understand that it may be more of a US topic, but still we now in the US time zone. So perhaps a lot of people listening are also wondering about that. So Max, maybe you can comment on that. You're muted.
I was answering, I was typing an answer to a question. What were we just talking about? The diversity in the industry?
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, this is the elephant in the room in a lot that's going on in North America right now. And a lot of conversations we're having is how to increase the diversity in not just our industry, but shine a light in all the industries kind of across the board. If you go to localization conferences, it's international, but in North America, at least, not very Black. And so, yeah, I mean, as a white person, I can only guess at how to do this. Clisri, do you want to talk about like what it was like? You went to Howard and yet you ended up in this industry. Like, what can we do?
I would definitely say that that adding more diversity to this industry would be very helpful, because the whole point of localization and internationalization is getting a product or concept from one culture to the next. And that quite naturally means that you have to have a broader group of people on your localization team in order to make that, you know, an actual successful process. So I think that, you know, a lot of organizations and schools like MISS or like GSIT at UMD should actually go out to probably even historically Black colleges or universities or HBCUs and start recruiting people from their world language departments or even their interpretation programs, because Howard University does have an interpretation program, but not too many people either know about it or they don't really know all the possibilities that they could like have with it. They just sort of take interpretation as an elective and then like, you know, mark it off and forget about it. So I say that, you know, just like outreach and recruitment is absolutely critical.
It's interesting that I see a comment now in the chat that Sam Burnett says, in Australia, it's just the opposite. Almost everyone in the translation course is from a non-English background. And I think it's the only industry that has this in it, because we are truly global. Yeah, we bring companies global, but we also are very global. So it's so hard to make one conclusion for the whole industry, yeah, because so many cultures are intertwined here. Just my thoughts. Anyway, I think we have some 15 minutes left. I also have a comment here from Renato Beninato. He says he disagrees with the comment about lack of diversity. In my class, there were students from over 15 nationalities and different cultural backgrounds. Yeah, so that's more or less what I also said. But yeah, maybe we can go to the questions. There are lots of them and we have like 15 minutes. I hope we will spend quite a lot of time answering, and I will go from the most upvoted downwards. So the most upvoted question is, Mariana asks, for people like me looking for a postgraduate course or certificate in translation localization after 10 years in the industry, what should we look for? I'm not quite sure what Mariana means by what to look for, but maybe we can interpret and give our own answers, maybe. Max?
I think generalizing, it's taking a look at what skills you have and how far you want to go in the industry. And in some cases, if you're a translator and you want to go into localization, we have a, I don't want to sell the program too much, but we have a 1-year intensive master's degree. So you can basically go from translator to localizer in a year. But if you're already if you're like a junior project manager and you want to go into management, like what do you need to do that? Or if you're a localization project manager and you want to get more technical, like I think Kayseri, you're going to be doing the University of Washington program, which kind of adds a technical component to what you currently have from Maryland. So I think it's looking at your own skills and seeing how far you want to go and deciding if you need a full-blown master's or if some Coursera or edX courses can get you to the next level. So yeah.
Okay. Oh, were you passing the mic to me?
Yeah, I think so. Just what is your next step?
Oh, so what I would say to look for in a program would be, like, of course, like cost effectiveness, because you do have to consider this to be an investment and make sure that it's something that you really want to do. And I would say that you should lean towards a program that has professors that are actually active in the industry. And that's one of the great things about the GSIP program at University of Maryland, because like all the professors were active in the industry when they were teaching. So we knew that we were learning things that were pertinent, and like all the texts that they would have us like translate would be something that was very current. And then like the technology was always up to date.
Okay, there's
nothing to add.
Yeah, I saw one question here. Okay, there's a question from Renato Beninato. I think there is a confusion between education and training. I don't believe the role of the university is to train people on specific CAT tools, but on the concept. Education is permanent, training is situational. What do you think, Max? I think all of us can speak up.
Well, I think generally, first of all, our program is CAT and TMS tool agnostic for the most part. We do cover specific CAT tools and specific TMS systems as well. But at the same time, we want students to be able to generalize and apply what they've learned to other things. For example, I teach subtitling in my audiovisual class, and if I could use the tools that Netflix uses, I would love to, except guess what? They're proprietary. And so I have to use other tools when it comes to subtitling. So that's a good example of a time when I have to use different tools and hope and pray that students can then transfer those skills to other tools. And I think for the most part, that's successful. I mean, you learn one CAT tool, and when they're easy to use as SmartCat, maybe you use another CAT tool and you're like, whoa, my gosh, why does this have to be so hard? But already you're making comparisons and you've learned one CAT tool, and I don't know.
I would say that the whole purpose of education is to make it so that you can always continuously learn, because a training is more like, you know, a brief little tutorial in a sense on how to do a new skill. But if you have a strong educational background in this industry, then you should just be able to like sort of intuitively pick up any new training that you do. And you should expect to do more trainings throughout your career, because it's simply needed in order to make sure that you evolve, because nothing is going to stay the same.
What's your take on this, Diego?
Yeah, I totally agree about the fact that universities should give you a input, a sort of like the mindset, and you will need to keep learning with training, in order to use Renato's words. Still, I think that some practice is still useful. As Max said, you can like practice on a tool and being able to do comparisons. And if you know how to use a complete CAT tools, I guess you can use other ones with ease. It's not going to be difficult. You don't need to learn them all at school. But if you are trained on one, maybe you can apply all the features are the same. So you can learn easily other ones as well, just to give an example.
A question popped up actually in my own mind, so I will ask about some generalizations. If we talk about patterns and anti-patterns in localization, because for example, we have our own Igor Afanasyev, who thinks that, for example, limiting character strings by a certain number of characters is an anti-pattern in the industry. And not to speak about this specific anti-pattern, but do you teach some kind of mindset that is not related to specific tools, but to such things like this, like patterns and anti-patterns? Max?
Yeah, I think if we look at any theme that we're exploring in the program, like I'm teaching my multilingual desktop publishing course right now. And so I'm thinking about like giving plenty of white space to your layouts. And I'm using non-inclusive language. There I go again. So, you know, having lots of extra space so that text can expand, and thinking about embedding words in graphics. And so, yeah, I mean, there are definitely patterns that we can get designers to follow, engineers to follow when they're developing applications. I mean, I think I refer to these mostly in my brain as like best practices or whatever, but I kind of like the idea of how like patterns where we see good things happening and what was it, anti-patterns? Like I kind of like that idea of things that go against the grain.
I'm not sure I pronounce it the right way, but I think that's actually a word.
But there are some contexts where, you know, absolutely you have to limit characters. Like I think subtitling, if we're going to create Netflix compliant subtitles, we absolutely have to tell our translators that they have to keep the character limit under control. And we all know that when you translate subtitles, you lose meaning to comply with that character count. So yeah, I think knowing when we're cutting, I guess it's corner cutting, isn't it? Ultimately, I feel like Igor should be added to the panel so he can answer that. It's like corner cutting.
I think when I talked about this with him, his point was that we should make an environment in which translators can see the result of their work like in real time. So they put the wrong number of letters, they see that it doesn't fit the screen, and so they modify it. So if we do anything else, then it's an anti-pattern. Igor just corrected me in our private chat.
Well, one development I love seeing in the industry is QA built into the translator workflow. And so some CAT tools are implementing QA as the translator translates. You know, I'm thinking of the MemoQ video preview tool, where as the translator translates, the translator has the video playing, and every time they translate a subtitle, it literally tells them if the reading speed is too fast or too slow. And so, you know, you don't have to do QA. That is your QA. And so if you can roll in a website context, like if your translator is I think translating directly on a website is a gimmick at this point. And that what we should really be focused on is having two screens where the translator has the actual website as they're translating being updated on another screen, but they're still in a more traditional CAT tools environment. You might disagree with that and think that live translating on a website is totally cool, but I think it's mostly a distraction at this point. That said, the QA side of that, letting the translators see their translation in context is worth its weight in gold. So yeah, I'm a fan of providing context, I think is what we would say.
Yeah, perhaps the next big thing in the industry will be when someone comes up with a way to provide context like much better than it is available right now. I mean, the whole system doesn't work in favor of this. But I think we digress also, so let me read some questions. M. Soltis, I'm not sure what the first name is, but anyway, asks, what role does continuous education play in the localization engineer role? Technology is moving so fast. How do you recommend keeping up with new developments? Perhaps I can ask this first to Chris Ruby, of like someone who might be considering continued education.
So just to be clear, the question was
about continuous education. So technology is moving fast. How do you keep up with the developments?
So I would say that some ways of keeping up with new developments would be following, you know, popular blogs for localization, you know, such as SmartCat's blog or maybe even Nimdzi. You know, just make sure that you are actually active in the industry and like able to see and sense trends so that you can, you know, be ahead of the curve.
Okay. Diego, you have any thoughts on that? Are you considering maybe continuous education?
For myself?
Yep. Why not?
What I'm doing is business stuff, because now I own a company, it's getting bigger, and this is where I need to improve. But yeah, I agree with the fact that you need to be on top of the curve and attending events. For instance, I founded the company in 2016, and I was at Lockwood in Barcelona 2017, and this is where I met you guys. And you saved my life, as Marka did, in different situations. And I learned a lot. We grew a lot because of that, and just because I attended Lockwood. Otherwise, who knows? So that's another source of education and continuing education.
Yeah, and source for another panel. I have a question here from Katrin Busman, actually. I'm sorry if I pronounced the surname not correctly, but it echoes with something we discussed earlier today. Now that we are doing things more virtually and that we're getting more used to learning online in general, is there an opportunity for institutions like MIIS to go virtual and offer fully online localization programs, especially given the gap between Europe and the US? Max?
Yeah, I mean, already this fall is the inaugural year of our online advanced entry TLM program. So we now have a fully online, fully asynchronous program in which from anywhere in the world you can sign up and consume content at your own schedule. We're intending this for full-time professionals who are busy, don't want to relocate, move to Monterey. It's not a cheap town to move to be quite honest. And anyway, I think that, yes, I think beyond what we're doing in my program, I think COVID-19 has forced all programs essentially to convert to an online format. So I think you're going to see a lot more training programs offering online options, especially in localization, but I also think across the board in all sectors.
Great. So we have some 3 minutes to go, and I wanted maybe each of you to wrap up with some kind of 1 minute speech and advice to anyone who considers educating themselves in translation and localization. So let's go one by one, maybe Diego.
Well, easy one, keep learning. And there's a lot of online stuff now and even university courses. I'm not sure. We'll see if it's really the same value that they can offer. That is a question for Max, or a comment for him, maybe. But yeah, there are a lot of opportunities. I wish I had the same opportunities when I started, honestly.
Yeah, we all do. Clisri, anything from you?
I would say, especially to anyone who may be watching now that is currently an undergrad and is a language major, definitely look into localization. Absolutely consider getting a master's in localization or translation, and have a better sense of what this industry is about, because there are lots of opportunities, and no, you don't have to be locked in as just a translator or an interpreter. And if you want to be, like, that's fine too, but just know that there are several options.
Great. Max, your words.
I think I want to use my 1 minute to conclude and just ask people to help people join this industry, in the sense that I think we're like one big, I was going to say happy family. We're like one big family, and we need to convince people to join us. Our conferences are fun. And once you get into localization, you're a part of this community, and there do seem to be a lack of walls between sharing best practices among businesses. I was at a conference that will remain unnamed, talking to a person from a company that will remain unnamed. And I asked what his challenges were right now. And he said, "Oh, I can't talk about my challenges." And I looked at the badge and I was like, "Oh, okay, fine. That's really boring. Why are you here at this conference?" And in that case, but normally there's a lot of knowledge sharing. And I think that's really a great thing. So I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, thanks for great last words, Max, and thanks, Diego, thanks, Clisri, thanks, Max, for being here. Hi, Igor. We are just in time, even a bit ahead of time, but yeah, I enjoyed it very much, and hopefully this will bring more interesting discussions in our community. Please follow us, not follow us, go to smartcat.ai/community and speak up. We need you.
Yeah, I'm a living link here, so please read my screen and follow this link. So thank you so much, everybody. This was really insightful. This was like very dynamic.